Hey everybody, it's Chainsaw Gears 12 here, and welcome to another What If video where I talk about a topic, a different scenario that actually happened in real life. So basically thinking about what would have happened if this didn't happen or if this was different. So basically we're going to just jump into that, and as you can read above, what if Cliff Burton didn't die, or what if Cliff Burton was still alive? But two things before I jump off into this topic. I don't know how long the video is going to be, but I'm going to try to keep it under 9 minutes, so hope for that. But two little things. Number one, if you haven't already, go check out my Ask Me Questions 5 video where you can ask me questions about anything, and that video answering your questions will be out on Friday. So make sure you get your question in by Friday. If you have more than one question, go ahead and throw it at me. Don't really matter. Make sure you get in before Friday. The second thing is this topic about the Cliff Burton situation. I don't want people to, screw it up or, screw up my words and say that this is exactly what would happen. This is my own interpretation. Of course, you guys are going to give your opinion. If you don't feel comfortable talking about the subject, let him, don't talk about that kind of stuff. Let him, let him be, let him, be dead. Don't get into this. Basically, I'm not trying to sound like I'm a bad person or someone would say that, but there's some people that just don't bother with that type of stuff. If you are, then you don't have to watch the video if you don't want to, but basically I'm just going to talk about the events after his death. What would have happened if he was still alive? So we're going to go off into And Justice for All. So as we all know, if Cliff didn't die and he was still alive, Jason Newsted would never have been in the band. That's one big major factor. But back to Justice for All. The thing is, if Cliff was alive, I can't necessarily say, or anybody could say necessarily for the fact that all the titles of the albums would be exactly the same. I personally do think, though, that And Justice for All, that album, that type of album, would have came out at that point, regardless of what the title is or who was bass player or whatever. Because at the time, all these bands were putting out more technical, progressive albums, and so Metallica wanted to do it as well. But the thing is that if you know And Justice for All very well like I do, the album is completely different from the first, not the first three albums, but basically completely different from Master of Puppets. Master of Puppets had a lot of melodic, but it had the thrash moments, don't get me wrong, but it had a lot of melodic moments. But In Justice for All, barely any. It was basically 90 to 95% straight thrash riffs with the solo, and basically that's it. There wasn't a lot of harmonizing melodic stuff that Cliff Burton would have threw into the music because he wasn't around. But I do think, though, that In Justice for All, or this technical album with Cliff Burton, would have been more progressive, more technical, but at the same time have a lot of melodic type stuff, because Cliff Burton's known to have he was known to have that capability of hearing things and throwing in melodic and harmonizing pieces and basically make it more of a movement, there was more, adding more to the basic foundation of what the other guys have already wrote down. That's why Master of Puppets was such a melodic piece, because Cliff Burton had so much influence on that record. Same thing with Ride the Lightning. There was a lot of influence from his side in order to make it what it sounds like today. If Cliff Burton went around with those albums, they would have been straight thrash like Kill 'Em All and not a lot of melodic stuff. But I think In Justice for All, that type of album would have happened, but it would have had a lot more melodic type stuff, and it would have been sound a lot more like Master of Puppets, but brought up to that level of sound that it did have for And Justice for All. Off to the Black Album. I personally think the Black Album, I don't know, it just depends, because their success basically was just keep on going up through the records. So I personally do think, yeah, they would have been contacted by Bob Rock, and of course Cliff's still in the band, so it's kind of hard to say how they would go with that. But I think if that would have happened, and they did the Black Album with Bob Rock, I personally think the Black Album would not have been a straight, commercialized heavy rock or hard rock album, as some people do say. But I feel like that maybe they wouldn't have went down the route. Maybe there would have been something different that Cliff could have provided, because as we all know, if you were a major Metallica fan from the 80s albums before Cliff's death, then you would know that Cliff had a major influence in the music, because he actually could understand music. He was into orchestra type music. He was into all these different types of music, and he was able to put it into Metallica. So I think the Black Album, which barely had any melodies, yes, it had guitar solos, it had stuff like that, but to say that Cliff Burton could have done something to make all these songs better? Oh yes, he would have made the songs so much better, in my opinion. So the thing is that Cliff Burton would have had a major influence in that. Now, to the load and reload. Here's where it gets kind of confusing. Because with Cliff Burton, 1983 we had Kill 'Em All. 1984, Ride the Lightning. 1986, Master of Puppets. And then his death. So, and then we go from 1988 and Justice for All to Black Album in 91. Then we have Load in 96, Reload in 97. That's a big gap. My personal opinion, if Cliff Burton was alive, there would not have been that big of a gap between the 5th album, because I'm not going to call it the Black Album, because it could have been called something different with Cliff. There would not have been that big of a gap between the 5th album and the 6th album. My opinion, if Cliff was still alive, they would have been putting out records similar to their older stuff in the 80s that they were putting out when Cliff was alive. I personally think they would have just stuck to that format and then progressively added more stuff into it. I don't think they would have went down that load and reload path. Maybe, I don't know, because I guess it didn't really matter because the band was just like, we have to redo our image for the 90s, so maybe they would have went down that route. But my personal thing is, there was a lot of melodic and melody stuff in Load and Reload because they were trying to go for a softer rock punk type sound, like I guess. Not really 100% sure what you call Load and Reload, but it was not Metallica. It wasn't the Metallica everybody knew. But I think if Cliff Burton was alive during the Load and Reload era, if they decided, hey, let's do this, I think Load and Reload would have been more accepted because Cliff probably would have said, let's put more heavy stuff in here. But let's keep all the, the melodic type stuff we're trying to pull off, and we're trying to do something different. Because Cliff is all about doing something different, but we need to, keep that heaviness. It is Metallica, because that's what Cliff was all about, was the heaviness and the melodic type stuff, the harmonizing stuff. That's what Cliff brought to the band. Saint Anger would not have happened because Saint Anger happened because Jason Newsted left the band. Cliff was alive, Jason would never have joined the band, and there you go. I personally think, like I said, throughout the 90s, it would have been straight in the phone's ringing, blah, 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 that Load and Reload probably, if it would have happened, it would have been done differently with Cliff. And then there would have been more albums than Load and Reload. There would have been an album 2 or 3 years in between, so we would have had more albums with Cliff alive. Death Magnetic, 2008, it's hard to say. I personally think that if Cliff was alive at the time of Death Magnetic, they would have been still releasing records kind of like that. So it wouldn't have been off, it wouldn't have went back to the 80s, they would have stuck to that format. But like I said, I think there would have been more records. Oh, and I skipped a few things, but I wanted to go to the main discography. Now, S&M would have definitely happened because Cliff was so into the symphony orchestra. He was not in symphony orchestra like that, the San Francisco ones, but he was so much into like orchestra music. He was so much into that. Like, that's what he got inspired to write the stuff that you know from Ride the Lightning and Master of Puppets. That's where he got the stuff because he listened to so much of that stuff. Bach, Mozart, he was listening to that stuff and gaining, knowledge of how to write that kind of stuff and basically putting it towards Metallica, making them sound like how they were. So S&M would have definitely happened. Garage Inc. would have happened, I think, because Cliff Burton was so... he loved the Misfits so much, and they covered Misfits songs, and he recorded Am I Evil with Metallica, the cover of Diamond Head. So I feel like that Garage Inc. would have definitely happened. I think Cliff would have thrown in some more of his own band's ideas. So Garage Inc. probably would have had some different covers on it, but who's to say? But that's the video, guys. I know it's kind of like just running through their discography and stuff, but I mean, I think Cliff would have done basically help the guys, progressively get better and everything and write better stuff. Not saying that their stuff is bad. I'm saying Cliff had that talent of making something they wrote that's really good a little bit better, and it was so noticeable because Cliff was like that. So you're going to comment down below and let me know personally what you think, what Metallica could have done differently, or a certain thing that Metallica has done since Cliff died that it would have been different because Cliff was alive. So basically, comment down below and let me know what would Metallica be like if Cliff Burton, was still alive. So thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys soon.